I met Father Pavel through listening to Jane Ellis and Canon Michael Bordeaux of Keston Institute talk about what was happening in Russia. Now, how there were certain Russian Orthodox priests who would like to make contact with an Anglican church. And I listened, and I went away and thought about it and thought, this is what I would like to do. I always wanted to go to Russia. I always wanted to be there and to meet the Russian people. And so this was an opportunity to make a link between our parish in Tring with its 5 churches with Pskov, with Father Pavel Adельgейме.
What the main reason was?
Christian fellowship and friendship, total outreach and support for others, and our desire to communicate and have contact with the Orthodox Church in Russia with a particular parish. So make this bond between us. And that was how it began in 1992, because I was given the name of Father Pavel Adельgейме of the Myrbearers Church and also of Pskovich Church, which he at that time had for a number of years. So that's how it all began, through Keston Institute and Canon Michael Bordeaux, the chairman and president of that institute. They have been monitoring all that was happening in Russia and in other communist countries during the Soviet time to discover what was happening to religion. And basically they had accumulated information, and over the years that was very important because they were actually very, very interested in everything to do with Russia, with its governance, with its society, with what was happening basically. Because it was in a sense cut off from us because of the Cold War. I can remember as a child desperately wanting to go to Russia and knowing it was not possible. And so the first time I landed in St. Petersburg, or Leningrad as they just about still called it, it was a very, very fantastic moment for me and others who went that very first time.
You had many contacts with Father Pavel. What are you speaking about, and what about was your letters between us?
Letters, right.
Yeah.
I sent a letter in 1991 asking to make to have a link with his parish, the Myrbearers, and the letter never got there. There was no telephone, he had no telephone, so I couldn't ring. I then heard that someone was going from Watford to Novgorod with friendship and supplies to a church there. And so I got in touch with this person and said, would you take this letter with you? And he took it to Novgorod. And rather than just post it, the family said, we'll drive you there to Pskov. We'll find Father Pavel Adельgейме and we'll give him the letter personally. And they arrived at lunchtime, having travelled 4 hours in the car, and he welcomed them, said, come in and have lunch, come and join us at the table, and then I'll show you around my churches and all that it means to me. And then he said, I want to make this link with this parish in England. Take that message back. They must come and visit us next year. In 1992, you must come. And so it began.
What was your first impression about Father Pavel when you met him?
An amazing man of depth and wonderful presence and eyes that just focused on you. When he talked to you or you talked to him, you knew he was listening. You knew he was alongside you. He wasn't thinking of other things. And so the first impression was he came to St. Petersburg to meet us there. A lot of other people came with us, came there too, to greet us. We were 9 people in the old, what do you call it, the terminal, the older terminal of St. Petersburg. And there was a huge banner saying, welcome to Tring. And there was a bus, minibus, they collected, they had, and they took us off to a place where we'd stay the night. And Father Pavel hadn't arrived because he had services, it was a Sunday. But he then travelled by car, or came home perhaps by train even, and met us there. And arms outstretched, and instantly I felt at home. And I always remember the first night because he said to me, "You look Russian." And I said, "Great. I've always wanted to know that because I have this very high cheekbone. You are Russian." So I said, "Fine."
Yes.
And that's my first thing.
Yes. Now we all know the big tragedy now with Father Pavel. What the Pavel...
Can I say what happened in between?
Yeah.
We used to go out there. They came to us, so we paid for them to come here. We went out there several times. The link of friendship became very strong. And they would stay here with us in our parish. Everybody would give them hospitality. We took them round. We took them to the St. Albans Cathedral. He was welcomed by the bishop. He and Vera and all the congregation who came with him. They were introduced to the abbey at the cathedral. He gave talks around the diocese on Russian Orthodox faith. So it was an amazing link. And when we went there, we joined in the worship of the church. I've been to many services, sometimes lasting from 8 o'clock through to 3 o'clock in the afternoon, because there would be a communion service, there might be a baptism, there might be a funeral, there might be a wedding, and then we'd go home. So there was a lot of wonderful opportunities to participate in Russian worship. And I always found it very moving. I loved it.
Can you please maybe find some interesting letter and just a little bit read to us some interesting places from these letters, yours or Father Pavel to you then?
Well, he wrote in Russian, so I can't do that much. But let me see what I can do. Well, this is a letter from his daughter, Anna, who now lives in Detroit. And she wrote this when we invited her here to meet her parents when they came from Russia. She came back from Detroit. So she says, "We came back home safe and sound and even enjoyed our flight." Let me just note, just a minute. That's not actually right. Yes, it says here. So they came. Oh, this is somebody else. No, it's not Anya. It's somebody else. That was a letter. Forget that bit. Forget that bit. This was written by Anna, whom you met with Victor. So this is a letter from Anna when she came over for the first time in 2003.
Okay, but exactly from Father Pavel.
Right. Let me see. Because it's always been, I can't actually find one from him, because we've always had the ones that we wrote to him. Let me see what I can describe of our time. Stop it for a moment. The very first one. Right, I went for Christmas to Russia. So it's a few years ago, obviously. I've been since, but this is one of them I wrote.
Okay, ready?
So what I'm trying to explain to you, we went to the Myrbearers Church, right? During the week, there were so many marvellous and unforgettable moments. The Christmas services and the choir. No longer 3 singers, but 16. And the singing of the Christmas liturgy is so beautiful. Quite often I was close to tears. It was just so wonderful to be there. And I kept thinking how amazing it was that here we were in Russia, celebrating the Christian faith and Christmas. Something which I could never have imagined doing before this link with Father Pavel was made possible. This was the first time we had worshipped in the middle section of the church because it had to be rebuilt. Now so beautifully and simply restored. A light with candles, illuminating the icons, and the church filled with people celebrating Christmas. 8 years ago, the church had been in ruins, but over the years, Father Pavel and his congregation have rebuilt the church with their own hands and own labour, somehow finding the resource to do it with.
Who's writing to this letter?
I wrote this letter after I got back. This is what I wrote, because we were always writing our impressions, and then I would write it in German back to Father Pavel. So every time we came back, all of us would write things to remember.
Did you speak with Father Pavel about situation in Russia, about the people, about some philosophic things, maybe?
About the faith, of course, shared faith. About the situation, how life was improving actually since 1992. The first time I went, I can remember there was very little in the market. 2 years later, that improved and got better and better. And I realised that there was a kind of optimism about what was happening in Russia. But this was not a political visit ever. This is basically about people, about us wanting to be near to people who we'd never ever had the possibility of meeting before, Russians. And so it was that aspect. It was the home life. It was the friends we made, the things we did together, the fun we had, the laughter we had. Long discussions we would have in the middle of the night when it was June, when we'd have the light nights. We'd sit in a kind of upper room, all of us, and talk and discuss our faith and share experiences, share our life with him and they with us.
Maybe you remember any interesting moments,
yes,
moments from this time.
Oh yes, I can.
Consider with Father Pavel.
Yes, I can actually remember. There's two incidents, particularly those first times. I can remember we were invited to someone's house, and we got there for the lunchtime, and she had all the curtains closed, and we said, "Why have you got the curtains closed?" Because I want us to feel cosy here. When I look out there is just ordinary flats. I want us to be cosy. And her son was there, and he said, and I got up to thank him. He said, "You know, this is very amazing. A few years ago, this would not have been possible because I'm a soldier. I would never have been allowed to talk to you. And here we are having a meal together, sharing our experiences and just showing you from friendship." The other one was that at the time, the very first time we were there was a Russian girl who was married to a Latvian, a Lithuanian rather, from Vilnius, sorry, Lithuanian. And they decided they had already been married by the state in Moscow. And they suddenly said to us, "We've asked Father Pavel if we can get married here with you as our friends in the church, because you are our friends now." So we said, "Oh, it'd be wonderful." So for the next day, we got everything ready. We gave her a skirt to wear, a nice blouse. We took the flowers out of the dining room from the vase we bought the day before for Vera. We cooked a cake. It was meringue cake, which took hours to do because we had to watch the oven, it wouldn't burn. And then we went off to Pskov for the service. And it was just so joyful and so illuminating. And it's just one of those memorable moments. There are so many, there are thousands, but each one special.
Maybe you can remember and say to me some ideas from Father Pavel, some his maybe because he was very non-ordinary person, very incredible person. Maybe you remember some philosophic ideas from his side, or something like this.
For me, it was a deep faith, but it was very practical faith. It was about compassion. It was self-sacrificing, cherishing love for all people. Anybody would come to him, knock at the door, and he would say, "Welcome, come in." And I can always remember the first years when obviously it was still quite new to be able to recognise that Christianity was now part of Russia again. And we were going through the street in Pskov, and someone came up and Father Pavel, he just put his head down, and Father Pavel gave him a blessing. And you knew that was a very special moment for that person, for Father Pavel. It was full of loving friendship and faith, and he was just full of compassion and joy. I never ever saw him get angry, or when he even talked about what had happened to him in his earlier times, he never showed any animosity to what had happened, because of course he had an artificial leg. Never ever complained. And one of the great things for me was that I went to Uzbekistan 3 years ago, wanting to go to Uzbekistan, to Samarkand and the Silk Route, and I went to Kagan, and found the church that Father Pavle had built in Kagan in 1967-69, from which he was then taken into hard labour. And I actually was in that church with the priest there, looking at the beautiful iconostasis and everything as you would imagine any beautiful Russian church to be like. It was quite a simple building, but inside it was amazing. And the tears I wept.
Orthodox Church, how is this? How is the relation?
Well,
not good or not very good?
Well, you can't say it exists. I mean, because we have somebody at Lambeth Palace who has this contact as an official person. We were just an ordinary parish who wanted to reach out, but I have no problem whatsoever. I have gone to Ennismore Gardens umpteen times for services.
To Russian
And I knew Anthony Bloom. I would listen to him at Christmas time or at Easter time. So, to me, there is no problem at all. I don't know how it was perceived by others, but certainly we were welcomed with open arms, and just as we welcomed him. He did so many good, wonderful. He created the church school, which was brilliant. I was there. He created a home for orphans to watch that they grew up. He built a candle factory in Pskov. He then started to build flats for them. I don't know what happened to them in the end. He used to visit the prison. I've been to prisons with him in Pskov. He'd go regularly to prison. The prisons themselves built a beautiful church in the prison itself, in the grounds of the interior courtyard. He took us to a school in 1993, it must have been, or was it 1994, it doesn't matter, where there were 100 children who had been looked after, who had no one apart from the people there who were caring for them, who had been left. But they were looked after, and he built a church there in that hospital. And he made links with everybody. He was open to all. People of no faith and people with faith. Didn't make any difference. Just it doesn't make any difference to me. I will speak to anybody and welcome anybody, with faith or no faith.
Janet, we all know what happened with Father
Yes.
Pavle. It's a terrible thing. He's died, unfortunately. And is it possible to explain from the God point of view or from the church? Could we explain this death, this terrible death, this destiny? Why?
Yeah, but let me work at it. That night I had rung Father Pavle to wish him happy birthday, which had been on the August the 1st. That was a Monday evening I rang. And Ivan came to the phone and I said, can I speak to Father Pavle? And he said, he's dead. I said, oh my, we didn't quite say it like that, but he did. He said it as taught, because we spoke in German to each other. And I thought he's had a heart attack or just died in that. And then I discovered through speaking to Victor that what had happened. I believe that even if he had known what was might happen, he would still have welcomed that young man into his home, or anyone. He would have never refused anybody. There was always a risk. Life is a risk. In life we have to be vulnerable. That's what love is about. Love is vulnerable. We can be hurt because of somebody, and we can be enriched by somebody. And certainly Father Pavle and Vera enriched everybody's lives. That's one of the great things. So for me, it's not a question of destiny. It's a question of it happened. But I believe that Father Pavle, even if he were to know, would still have gone ahead, because you don't turn anybody away. And it might have come out differently. It might have been that the man didn't do it and went away the next day feeling contented, more contented, helped and supported. None of us can tell. Life is not like that. I could go over that road today and be killed by a car. Is that destiny? No, not for me. That's the risk in life. I don't think of it as destiny and set in God in stone. For me, it's the risk when we're born and when we die. That's my philosophy. He was fun.
Say again.
Father Pavle was fun.
What do you mean?
We had such laughter. We had such amazing times. My husband was a Morris dancer. We were dancing down there with Morris, which is folk dancing. Father Pavel said, "Drum, Mickey, get the drum out." I put the drum hat on my head. What do I do now? Shall I dance? We've danced, we've sung. It was fun. And I shall just miss his voice and his presence. My world fell apart when I heard of his death and the way he died. But I knew that was the way it would always probably be, because Father Pavel took risks. But he was greatly loved and respected. Greatly loved and respected.
Okay.
All right. Of us all. Let me see, that's one there. I've got lots of pictures. That's Anya when she first came.